Makeine begins with an opening monologue about high school love. We don't care about that right now. Cut to our MC Nukumizu, who's happily reading a light novel in a family restaurant. He's getting a refill on his coke, he's walking with a spring in his step. There is nothing that could ruin this man's mood. A lover's quarrel, it appears. As he sits back down in his seat and watches from afar, the dramatics gets turned up to an 11. An emotionally defeated Yanami cups her face as the boy she likes chases after a girl. Nukumizu decides to pretend like he saw nothing, but then he sees more. As Yanami grabs a straw left over from the boy's cup, Nukumizu begins to panic, realizing he's the only one that's witnessing this. Yanami works up the courage, takes a fat sip of cola, making Nukumizu cup his face in embarrassment, but it's fine, because at least she doesn't know. Right? This is the level of absurdity that's present in Makeine True Losing Heroine, which is a title that doesn't exactly infer what the show is about, and the rest of episode 1 would have you believe it's something else entirely. Yanami joins Nukumizu at his table to sulk about how the guy she likes left for another girl, Yanami ordering lots of food but not having the money to pay for it, Nukumizu asking for the money back, Yanami still not being able to pay for it and offers to make Nukumizu lunches as a means to whittle down her debt, and to close off, they have a heartfelt conversation on the rooftop where Yanami, for the first time in the entire episode, speaks candidly about her heartbreak while Nukumizu tries his best to support her. And then you're like, okay, I get it, they're gonna do this lunch debt thing for the rest of the show where they'll eventually fall in love and that's kind of the gist. But then they just don't do that because they spend the next couple episodes getting locked up in a P equipment room where things happen, ascending to new planes of existence by reading the 108 magic words that'll lighten your heart, or having a guy's girlfriend pull Nukumizu into a change room, and when caught by the boyfriend, her hands cover enough of the letters on his shirt that says country to make out the letters NTR, and suddenly you're like, what the hell is Makeine even about? I don't know exactly, and that's confusing because everything, including the talks on AniList, is telling me that this should be a romance comedy. And I guess for all intents and purposes, it is that, but Makeine feels less like a show that has a central storyline with characters you're kind of familiar with because you've seen 109 romance anime, and more like the dramatized day-to-day experience of some high schoolers whose lives are messy and don't make sense a lot of the time. It's definitely not a romance between these two. Hell, they become friends in the 4th episode, but amazingly, it doesn't matter that it's not. Whether the show wants to talk about finding out your childhood best friend who you like is dating someone else, how to process your love for two people when half of that love is unrequited, or accepting the what could have been because of some words that were never said, Makeine still kicks ass. You feel for these characters almost immediately regardless of their roles. They're relatable not just in the way they face situations, but also in the situations they face. They find solace and comfort in one another, not through a magical moment that connects them, but rather through growth that's been expanded upon episode by episode, which makes that growth feel real, feel rewarding. And while there are times when I think things get a little bit overcomplicated, that's not exactly a knock on the show because the things we deal with as human beings is sometimes overly complicated. I would love to dive in and talk specifics about each character because the writing in the show is just that good, but my gift to you is being able to experience that firsthand because really it deserves nothing less than that. For me, this is Makeine's ace in the hole, its ability to reach almost butchy levels of ridiculousness, approach the romance genre in such an unconventional manner, and somehow execute that well enough to be emotionally resonant. That is not an easy task, so huge props to the writing team for even making that possible, but I also think a big part of why they could do that is because of Makeine's Standout Production. Makeine has proven that it's A1 Pictures' best yet. The show is genuinely impressive on so many levels. It's directed beautifully by Shotaro Kitamura with absolute eye candy sequences like this, fisheye shots to describe a character's distaste for somen noodles, or the intricate, needless, but hysterical visual gag of a character eating a candy stick in the fall, framing it as if they were smoking a cigarette. And this level of quality extends to every part of Makeine. The opening is this absolute color explosion art piece. It does some really cool stuff with its editing, rotoscoping, and 3D text tracking, and it's such first-class level adaptation that I can only assume having your work be expanded upon at this level must be any creative's dream. Not to mention, the song TSUYOGARU Girl is a fucking banger, headlined by BotchiBoromaru, who you might recognize from the ending of another anime during the summer season, The Elusive Samurai, featuring Mossa, the lead vocalist for NECRY TALKIE, which was the band that did the opening for the Scott Pilgrim anime, and it really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone why Makeine's opening can trade blows with Oshinoko Season 2's. But it doesn't end there because we haven't talked about Makeine's 3 different endings. Yes, you heard that right. right! Ending 1's Love 2000 is Yanami's ending. It has 4x3 real-life visuals straight out of Fooly Cooly, and technically has 2 variations, one being in the city and one at the beach. Yanami is also an eccentric person. She's brutally honest about who she is, for good or for worse, so it makes sense that her ending is so unconventional. Hell, it might even be her who's filming all the shots shown. Ending 2's Crazy For You is Lemon's ending. It's otherworldly beautiful and represents her pure-hearted nature. There's little, if any, rendering going on here, which syncs up perfectly with the theme of her being pure. It's extremely vibrant colors, some of the prettiest line art I've ever seen, and I love the direct contrast between this ending's fantasy look and Yanami's straight-up IRL visuals. The ending itself is based on her love for Mitsuki, which makes sense given her arc in the show, and I like that she actually wakes up from her dream because that's just a very Lemon thing to happen. Last but not least, ending 3's Feel My Soul is Chika's ending. It's noticeably more simple than the other two, both in art style with its watercolor look, but also in song, which obviously makes sense because Chika's a way more timid person, and because she's not as earnest about her feelings, it's really just the simple things. Petting a cat you met while walking to the station, waiting for the train, or finding a bench somewhere and eating lunch. I really like how small she is in this shot and how big everyone else is who's figuratively and literally walking past her. Really, it showcases how different all 3 endings are and how well they match each character. They're all so varied and solid standing, and shout out the VAs for singing the songs for their own respective characters. That's something they didn't have to do, but really is appreciated because it just makes these endings feel that more personal. And all of that isn't even accounting for Makeine's exceptional soundtrack. Composed by Kana Utatane, who also did the soundtrack for Overtake, and oh, what's that? Someone's made a video on that show? That's so crazy! Go check that out if you're interested. I already knew she could cook given her ability to turn motorsport into music without incorporating any Eurobeat. Seriously, that is mega impressive. But specifically, I was always fond of her music because it always felt like it had this sense of intentionality to it. That's conceptually difficult to describe, but Utatane has made the jump from motorsport to a romance comedy of all things without breaking a sweat. Songs feel tailor-made for each scene, almost as if the scene was completed, watched, and then composed for, which, as far as I know, isn't how soundtracks are made. There isn't a single song that'll disappoint you, and from the opening monologue alone, just give them that main theme and listen, you too will understand. And if all of that still wasn't enough to convince you to watch Makeine, then maybe this will. On the official website for Makeine, and I want to reiterate here, this is legit, I'm leaving a link to this in the description because it sounds like a fucking joke, they're keeping track of all the calories consumed by Yanami per episode, which is just the most unhinged thing I've ever seen a show do. If you check out their Twitter, sometimes they'll post, hey, Yanami is eating up to 58,000 calories. I don't know why this is a thing, but I also don't care. It's amazing. I love it, and it frankly fits the show so much. Makeine is a show that, at its core, is unorthodox, strange, but also bewilderingly high quality. It's a story about characters and their journey and how they navigate the reality of being a true losing heroine, even beyond their rejection. You boot up any of its episodes and instantly you get the sense that people working on this care, and that's like my favorite thing about media, being able to notice the passion behind the creatives. For a show that I wasn't even going to watch just because the title sounded ridiculous, it's genuinely blown me away, and whether you are laughing at its hilarity or being wrapped up in its drama, you'll realize that it is seriously, without a doubt, one of the best things to have ever come out of the rom-com genre.